Five.
Yeah. Although we weren't going to doing recommendations tonight, it's not the end of the world, but still, getting less than 5.
Do you want me to start yakking? Because most of the stuff I already emailed out to everyone about the conference. Just say the word and over.
Let's give like 1 more minute.
Okay.
You'd think that after Monday night's meeting, people would show up.
No, like, come on.
Maybe they didn't watch and just assumed it was over.
I watched it, so it's always your next price.
You did watch it, yeah.
She's like,
I was at a work meeting.
All right, well, might as well go ahead and get started. Let's do introductions for the camera. Ken Lish, OSAC Chair.
Tracy Collar, committee member.
Ryan Welch, member.
Mark Laces, trustee liaison.
Allison James, staff liaison.
Perfect, and I see a couple more rolling in right now. Give me a sec. Perfect timing, just got started.
Excellent. Sorry we're late.
No worries. Pray for you guys to jump in introductions as soon as you sit down.
Just did.
Yep, all you.
Sean Samuelson, member.
I'm Sarah Librant, member.
All right. And seeing no members of the public, we don't have any public comment tonight. So we'll jump right into the first topic. Tracy giving a debrief on the COSA conference.
Okay, so my first time up at COSA, and I do think, I don't know if you recommended last year, that it would be really great for staff to go. I know there was talk of Allison maybe going, but there's a lot of staff up there and a lot of great collaboration with different towns. Not a huge number of advisory committee members, which I thought was kind of unfortunate, but I know it's because we're volunteers and whatnot. Did you see the same thing?
That was the same when I went.
Yeah.
I think I was the only volunteer. Everyone else was staff and whatnot.
Right.
It's a different dynamic, but
It is, but some staff are staff in one town and then volunteer on open space in another town. So that was kind of nice. I met a lot like that. So anyway, some good talks. I'll just summarize a couple, run down a few that I went to. There was a return on investment in conservation easements that was interesting, and this huge study that was done by CSU, and the return on investment is quite good. There was a great program done for conservation education in the foothills of Mount Kenya that some people from CU and from BOCO went over to Kenya, did a lot of education that was really interesting. An update on the online statewide trails map. Not a lot of updates, not a lot of info. I know you went to one last year, didn't you, Ken, on that? He was mostly wondering how to get the data from everywhere and make it current. So kind of requesting input from everyone who was there. BOCO Raptor Recovery presentation, which was fascinating and the most amazing photos. And BOCO is increasing their eagle numbers, and I believe that the city of Boulder was increasing their falcon numbers. I can't remember. And then a restoration on Breckenridge Cucumber Gulch, which is right at the base of Peak 7, 8. It's this huge valley that you've all probably seen, and I sent out a photo of that, and that was just really neat to hear how they went from it really falling apart to bringing it back to a great habitat. So a few more in-depth take-homes. There was a presentation called Growing Up Boulder, and that is a City of Boulder program that takes input from all ages, so preschool and children and teens and junior rangers. And they used that in their Northwest BOCO Trail project. So they got input from everyone in the community, and they took that input and decided what they were going to do to redo their trails, which I thought was really fascinating, and they showed all the data on why this is good. And the biggest thing for me to grasp from that is that we're not experts on every age range and even every subgroup. And even though we are representatives for open space, we don't know what those specific subgroups' desires and needs are, and that was really fascinating. So they're going to use that same process to redo their 2018 master plan for their open space and sites plans, which I thought was really cool. And then, of course, I had to go to BARC, which is a Jeffco project, how they deal with dogs and humans. And I love that they put dogs and humans, like as an afterthought. So they have done a couple projects to work to collaborate with citizens. And they've got a few goals, leashing, respecting wildlife, knowing where they can go on the trails. And this is run by the park rangers. And then the last one is always picking up and throwing away the dog feces. So they created some BARC rangers who are the rangers' dogs, and they all have a bunch of rules that they have to follow, but they use them as good role models for other citizens' dogs. And then they created an offshoot off that, a volunteer BARC patroller program. So now they have, I can't remember the number written down somewhere, but a lot of volunteers that passed a bunch of tests and made sure they're healthy and they can do a bunch of things, and those are their volunteer BARC patrollers. So it's very cute. So they had a lot of ideas on what to do for trail etiquette, and those role models are one of the ideas. Also social media, so they use Twitter and Instagram. One of their BARC rangers has his own account on Twitter and sends things out, and it's really cute. And then they do traditional media like signs, but they don't think that the signs that we have posted, in every open space area are very effective, because there's don't do this and don't do that and don't do that and don't do that. So they do these sandwich signs, like, if you know what I'm saying, just the traditional fold sandwich ones with a really big bright photo, and I emailed out photos of those and one clear message, and they have found great response from that people will read them and come up to them and say, oh my gosh, is that a real coyote going after that dog? Like, is that an actual photo? Does that happen? Are there coyotes here? So a lot of uneducated people that have gotten a little bit of enlightenment. I thought that was cool. They do community events as well, so a trails cleanup day and community partnerships with the sheriffs and the shelters, and then they do a lot of giveaways, and here's a couple of their giveaways, but it looks like they do a ton. So this wagon load is, you can attach it to your dog, which I think is a riot, and then you put the poop bags in there. And it's plasticky, so it doesn't smell, and it's got a reflector on it. And then they just have a different color, but the same concept that we have for those. And then they also do bandanas to wet down their, and teach them, get this wet and wet down your dog and use it in the summer so the dog's not as hot, and put it on their belly as well. And then it was a very interactive crowd, so they gave a few more ideas and suggested theatrical poop bags, which I'm not sure exactly what that is, but more bright and entertaining, I guess. A cute pickup day was on April 1st. I don't remember what county this was, but they called it April Stools Day.
Oh, gosh.
And then a lot of places use the no poop fairy signs, and they find those very helpful. And then they showed us a couple short videos, really short. So because we all have insanely short attention spans now, like 7 seconds or something like that, on ways how
You lost me there. What?
I know exactly how dog feces is harmful and yada yada. So and if we want to use their sandwich boards, we can contact them, and we just need to add our name and logo to the bottom, and we can use those. So, and if anyone else wants to see the wagon load, fire away. And then the last one that I want to touch on, the last presentation, was a roundtable acquisition, and it was two totally different examples of how to get creative in acquiring open space and water. One was the West Bijou Creek / Mule Gulch open space in eastern Arapahoe County, which I'd never heard of, but apparently it's huge, and there's actually fossils on it, and it looked quite fascinating. And the other was the Farm and Water Viability Preservation in Larimer County, so pretty close to us. And they just presented their challenges and ways that you can overcome them when you're having difficulties. So one is, what do you do when you don't have enough money? Of course, that's the biggest issue. And it's find other resources. And they presented a lot of organizations who have the exact same goals as all of our open space committees, like the Trust for Public Land, the Plains Conservation Center, GOCO, of course, we all know, and the Conservation Fund, as well as many others that I was unable to capture. And they also really emphasized, what do you do when those traditional organizations don't want to work with you, and it's get creative. So look for neighboring towns, local people, even private donors, like for the the farm acquisition, the water viability one, they used the Gates Foundation, which is a private foundation, and ended up giving them money. So a lot of lessons, like manage the landowner's expectation, look for those partners, find the change makers. A great example of, when they're looking to sell, there's usually some people who really want the money and other people who want to preserve. So find the change makers and work with those people who are have the same goals. Trust your team, minimize the cooks in the kitchen. I think that's true for everything, right? Prepare that every step is going to be a battle in the acquisition. And anticipate the headlines. Work with, like they talked about working with a daily camera and things to really get in front of those headlines. And remember that you can't please everyone. And last interesting point on it, I thought, was there's a key with the landowner, and the landowner is always in the driver's seat, but you must find a way to get them on the same page. But first you have to create that relationship and try to meet their desires and needs, and then keep following up with them. And I thought it was really fascinating to hear, I think it was a gal from the Conservation Fund talking about how crucial that is to do with any land that you want. So I think that's the summary. There was it was very inspiring. There was a lot of good momentum that people had. I actually got to see one town. It wasn't Lafayette. I can't remember where it was, but they acquired property on one day that we were all out doing a walk and, high-fiving each other, and I was a little jealous. That's really cool. So I just hope that we can, be as assertive in our endeavors going forward. That's all.
So was there anything that jumped out at you throughout the weekend or a few days that you thought maybe we could implement here or anything like that?
Really focusing on that last one, the roundtable acquisition, and working with other organizations and being assertive with those landowners of the property that we know that we want. So they're talking about catching it on the front end instead of just waiting for, there's now that for sale sign,
Okay.
And I know that our town staff communicates with them, but I don't know that we always know the details of that. And what's really going on and how often they're following up and what the relationship is and who they're working with. And would the town board allow us to consider collaborating with other organizations, considering that there are so many in Colorado and we're so fortunate to have all of those at our disposal, but we haven't really reached out to any of those. So I think that's the biggest thing. And then all the bark things.
Mm-hmm.
If we ever did any new trail design like that Shan, I wondered about if it would ever be possible to implement that growing up Boulder concept where they got information from all different ages and all different subgroups. How could we do that? Is that a possibility? And don't we have, what's the youth corps?
The youth, with our town or the...
Town, with our town. What are they called?
Youth Leadership Council.
So I don't know if that would be an idea to work with them on that. Instead of just, creating a new trailhead design and implementing it with our own ideas or with some designers' ideas, it might be nice to collaborate a little bit more with our town so everyone feels like they have kind of a piece of it, but it's just an idea.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions or anything for Tracy?
Just a quick question. So were there multiple different kinds of talks to choose from?
Mm-hmm.
How did you go about choosing the ones you went to?
Personal interest and relevance to us.
Yes, okay. Just wondering.
Like Kenya, not very relevant
Right.
to us, but very interesting to me personally.
Has the town of Superior ever presented at this conference?
I've been to the conference once when I first started, and this year I'm going to go because I'm at a week-long management leadership school. But not that I know of. But it is a fun conference to go to. It's really interesting.
They're pretty, I would say most of them are pretty in-depth big projects, like the return on investment and conservation easement. I don't know how long that they did that study, and there was collaboration with the state of Colorado and also some type of legal push to do that study. So pretty big projects, the people that actually do present. But yeah, great info.
Yeah, I think the year that I went, it was also dominated by like Jeffco and Boulder County, the jurisdictions that have gigantic staffs that can pull off these gigantic projects. I mean, it's one of those, you see the scale of what they are versus remember the four square mile town. Puts things in perspective a little bit.
And it's also back to back with NRPA, which is the big National Parks and Rec Association conference. So, you know, I guess there's some people will go to the Colorado conferences and some people go
Gotcha.
to national.
But you're right, Boulder has a huge presence there, huge. But I was just amazed at the stuff they're doing, just completely blown away. It's really cool.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Tracy. Appreciate it.
Thanks for letting me go. Oh, it was a great experience. Appreciate it.
Y'all heard how great it was. Volunteer next year. Yeah. All right.
There were little kids up there, you know, people use it as like a vacation thing, and that mom was watching her dad was watching the kids during the day and that was nice. So
And I take your preferences and try to.
yeah, Allison was great to work with.
Okay. So moving on. Discussing the open space acquisition plan. Allison, can we pull it up? And then Ryan basically let you walk everybody through it.
Sure. So just while Allison's doing that, so Ken and I have been working on this quite a bit. I'll take
Put it in
that.
perspective.
Thank you.
Ryan's been working on this quite a bit.
I've been working on this quite a bit. Ken's had obviously some other things he's been working on. I just have some notes here that just to try to keep myself organized. So I want to just go through. I went through Ken's notes. There's just a few things I think we need to discuss. Let's see. Let me just get into them. So, Ken, I took a lot of I pretty much accepted all your edits.
Okay.
So I just left the big things in here. So these notes don't matter. I think the biggest one here is this history section of the document. So originally we discussed that we might add some more history to this. There's a big gap between when the OSAC fund was formed, or when the tax was formed in 2001. This document was in 2005 originally, or 2004, I don't remember. And so now we're 12 years later. We're almost, Ken's comment was maybe the history section isn't as relevant just because we're not as new. And this is a follow-up to the original document. And I don't know if it adds much value to someone reading this about what the parcels are available in the town. What else would the history help you understand? I think maybe if we just reference that there was a tax ballot in 2001 that started this in the introduction, then we could actually get to the property sooner. But this is a point that we should discuss and get people's take. Oh yeah, sorry, we can scroll down. Ken has a bunch of comments in here. I didn't even try to manage your edits just because, we could go on for pages and pages of history of OSAC, and my view is that's not the intent of this document.
Yeah, and then to add, and you'd see it. We'll distribute this to everybody after the meeting as well, so you guys can actually dig into it, and we can get everybody's in detail comments, edits, whatever. But you'll also see at the end we have appendices that also list what the original parcels were. So even if we slim this down, we're not losing track of where we started. I in the comments that I wrote, I went back and forth a lot. This was I didn't have a very strong feeling which way to go.
But I really struggled with that section when I was working on the document because I felt like that it was there, and so I needed to put more in there. And then I'm glad you mentioned that what value does it really bring? Because the other thing I do want to mention is that we do say right here that the original, this is intended to be an update to the original report, and you're welcome to go read the original report referenced right in the document.
I think it would be helpful. I think in one paragraph you could say like when the committee began and that tax, and then I saw on that next page there was like an evaluation of the original 18 pieces or whatnot. Oh, the undeveloped properties. So maybe you could just say there was 18, and then how many the town has acquired since then, and then move into the rest of the document, referencing the appendix of what those different properties are, if we want to include that.
So who is the audience of this updated document? I guess that's the big question I have, because if it's for the board, do they need it? Because they already know what the 2005 looks like, and I don't think they really care about, I mean, this is just an update to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're already referencing the 2005 for historical information. They can look back to that. I'm not sure that there's anything really important in the history section that we need to add to it that would matter. I mean, and again, the whole basis of us updating this document is just to eliminate all the properties that have been developed or bought or whatever else. It is to show what is currently available, what our priorities are, and use that as a guide going forward.
So I think that's a good point with the audiences. So this will ultimately get wrapped up into the Prost Master Plan. I
Okay.
believe I'm using the right language. So Allison, I know it's on Prost Act's work plan as well to update the Prost Master Plan. Is that something that you as staff help with as well, or is that all? That's just purely committee driven?
It's committee driven as far as I know.
Okay, and as far as the history that you might be aware of, is the Prost Master Plan, is that again just a board-oriented document, or is that a just external facing that's supposed to be used by the community as well, or?
Well, both of the plans are online on the website, so I think they're just available for anybody who's looking for it, and also for the committees to reference for different projects that they work on. I do know that the two were done like really close together, you know, the first time,
Okay.
and they kind of play off one another, I think.
So maybe a good way to think about it for what we include is just filling any gaps between what was in the initial history in the document that we refer right back to. I mean, definitely we can hit the big high-level things to make sure people have a just broad understanding if they pick up this document only. But if we just fill the gaps between what was in the last iteration to what's happened now, that might be the right way to go then.
I mean, because that is one option, right? We did change our mission statement, but I don't know. I mean, that's
Yeah.
OSAC related. That's not, I don't know if that's, how relevant that is to the
That's true.
open space acquisition.
It's true.
So I have a quick question for the group. Is this going to be, is the intention to be like published like the other one on
Mhm.
the website and
Yes.
available? Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So my thought on that is that we would replace the original one on the website with this one. And then the original one should stay on the web, but not a direct link to it. That if you got this document, you could then pull up the old doc. That's my
Just archive
thought.
old.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want it to, we still want it to be there, but we don't want to have direct access from, I don't know. My vote is to remove this section. I just think it'll make the document easier to read.
I'm fine with that.
I mean, to me, really, the one piece of information that's valuable to this document is when did the sales tax go in?
Yeah.
And we can put that anywhere in the
Yeah.
document without having to
Should not be a
that. So
section.
I'm in agreement with you all.
Yep. And I have that note, so from Sarah, your note, I'll just include that in the introduction, and then we'll get rid of this section. Good? Okay. So then we get into approach and methodology. I guess the question here that we left was that we have, in the end, we do show an appendix of all the rankings of how we came out. The question was, should we include the original spreadsheet that we used? That was my question.
Meaning the one that showed us in ProStack?
No, the one that Sean had put together that had all the various rankings, that was more, that was a recommendation to use that.
Okay.
I'm biased, so I'm not going to say.
My initial thought is we didn't require ourselves to use it, so I don't know if every single person used that solely. So if we put it in, which again, that was great. So if we want to include it, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We just have to make sure we couch that it was used as a resource rather than purely driving what the rankings were.
I mean, even if we don't put it in, I definitely think we should archive this somehow. I don't know how we do that as an organization, to archive old documents. This is actually a separate topic that we should talk about at some point, is how to build archives of these documents and other things so people can have access. But that's...
Isn't there an archive of all documents that have been posted in the past somewhere? I thought there was.
Well, we have our committee folder that I use to pretty much keep track of everything. And then things that are related maybe in other folders, but I mean, we do have a shared drive, you know, for the town with most of the old documents saved digitally.
So anyway, I think that's maybe another topic, but I do think we need to archive your spreadsheet, because it definitely, I mean, whenever we need these in the future. But I agree with Ken. I just think since it wasn't mandatory, I don't think we should put it in. We should just have the summary. But open to other ideas.
And
I don't know if you wanted to go around and take a poll or what you wanted to do, how you wanted to vote on some of these things.
I think the summary is fine and not including the spreadsheet, just for those reasons that you guys already mentioned.
And I think once people read through this, if your mind changes, by all means, note that and say, you know what, I actually, after reading this and getting a little bit more context rather than just the high level that we're going through right now, I think it'd be better to change. I think that's still open. Any decision we're making right now isn't set in stone. So,
yeah, I like that, Ken, actually, when it's in more context.
Yeah, I am too. My only concern is that if people think that there's any variance from a standard set of information, that it's like, well,
yeah,
what are you basing that on then? I mean, you have to have something as a baseline. That's my only concern.
Were you thinking of putting it as like an attachment?
Like they did in the prior
I would just
document.
to copy it, just a picture of it, to show what the categories were.
So you were going to
what the
insert it in there?
criteria
Yeah.
were. I mean, and again, I could go as an appendix.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It doesn't hurt. I mean, it isn't.
Because it then makes it more quantitative. I mean, seeing a summary is one thing, but some people might say, well, what's it based on? You know, how did you rank that? You know.
My question would be, I mean, I used it when I did my ranking, so it wasn't required, but if we all used it, then to me it's valid.
Why not? Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe we should just,
did we all use it?
I used it.
Yeah.
And I just wouldn't want to lose it for new members, so they have that information.
Yeah, well, it sounds like we
All right.
used it. It wasn't
Well, let's
required,
let's include it then. I mean, I'll just add it in, and then why don't I add it in? We'll see if we like it in the final review.
Okay. So just as far as flow goes, we're talking about some changes right now. Rather than sending out this exact document, do you want to make
Yeah,
these changes
I want to make the
first
changes and then,
okay.
yep, that's what I'd like to do.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So then we get into the review of the properties. Anything I've highlighted, I want are things where we need more information. This is where we would need help from town staff filling in some of the data. The other thing I found in the old document is that basically it'll help if you look at it, but there's all these the parcel status. So I wanted to define what those meant up here. These ones didn't really have a clear definition of what, I mean, I know what they meant by development. In the old terms, they would say, sketch plan, Huntsman, to me, that didn't mean anything. I didn't know what that meant because I didn't speak the language of the town. So one decision we need to make is if we want to, I think what the intention here was, how far along is there some development for this property? And maybe, I think we should decide how we should communicate that. If it's at this level of detail, because if you go down to more, they'll be like, finally going to FDP. They'd use FDP in there, not the final development plan. So again, a lot of jargon that I don't think that if a citizen read, they might necessarily understand. So that's, I think, one we need to decide. I do think it's important to know how soon we think something would be developed. If we look at Bulljack versus Anderson, right, they're very different. But I don't know. We should come up with what we want to put down for development.
Maybe what we do there is just list whether or not there's been any level of presentation to the boards, whether it's hit concept plan, whether it's hit an FDP. I guess in between there's whether just plain an application has been submitted yet. That might be where we draw the line. It's again, just this is meant to be a snapshot in time, and that gives a good idea of where they are along the line.
Mm-hmm.
And then in this section up front, we can just define what each of those are.
Mm-hmm. I'm fine with that as long as we define it.
Yeah.
And then we say, So actually, where it is in the stage today of any sort of development.
I think that makes sense.
So, Allison, how hard is that for you guys to pull on? It's only a handful of properties, so it would be 4 or 5.
You remember that email where I had like the 19 properties and they were all kind of laid out and what page they were on and what they were zoned for, what stage they were in. If you want to send me that email back and like the stars, like if there was something more that you wanted from that standpoint, and then I can talk to our planner and just check on what stages they're in and try to give you the most up-to-date information. And then just try to really keep track of them, because they're changing once in a while.
Yeah, a lot of them, the status of them could change, so we'll just have to say at a specific date.
Do you want me to forward that email?
Would you please?
Sure.
Referencing an email sometimes is difficult, so that would be definitely helpful. And then
done.
the annexed, this was just my needing an understanding of the definition on what annexed means. I think I looked it up, but I don't remember. And I actually think I used that Boulder County property map. And I think from there I could tell whether or not it was annexed. So we just need to add a definition of what it means and then include it, status.
I'm sure Stephen could provide us a official definition of annexed.
Who?
Steve Williams, planner. I'm guessing that's who.
Okay, so then we get into the properties. So the change here was that we put the most recent map up front as opposed to an appendix, just so you can get a feel for it sooner. And then we just start going through the properties. What I did here was I kept the notes from the original document and then added any additional notes that I knew. Usually the location and the description stayed the same. The 76th Street parcels actually was an interesting one because I actually don't know which parcels it is. So what I did, this is where I used the Boulder County map and I put together this lower map to have all 7, but we need to try to figure that out. Which ones, is it all of them? Is it only the lower 4 that we're talking about? Because neither of them, I don't think any of them are actually annexed into the town.
Oh, is that right?
Not that I saw on that Boulder County map. I don't think so. So this one is just, I don't know.
Because I know that there's a sign that says you're exiting Superior after whoever the last one is there, Sown property.
That Boulder County, I mean, I guess I could bring up that Boulder, we could look at the map, but, I mean, I don't know if we need to solve it here, but this is a question we need to answer. This may be where we need some help from, I don't know, Allison, if this is something from staff or if it's just something we need to decide as a group what's included in these parcels.
Well, I guess we would have to formulate the structure for answering what you need,
Okay.
what you want to know. But
Okay.
I also sent you a link to the codes regarding annexation. So that might be a good resource. And then also we can always talk to Stephen.
Okay. The other area where I definitely need help from the town is with this open space requirement. I don't know where those came from. I assume it's just in the, but I assume each land parcel is different, or there's like defaults, and then how things are sold can be negotiated another way, like level 3 or now whatever
It's
it
also
is.
size, the percentage, and then whatever the size of the parcel is, a percentage of that size, and then whatever negotiations with the board are agreed upon.
So basically what you have in here now is what was in the original.
Yes,
one.
yes.
And I think what we'd be looking for from Stephen, probably, I'm guessing, is whether or not that's still accurate.
I don't think the percentages have changed in any way.
I mean, I think, so, skipping ahead real quick, I mean, this is clearly something we want as accurate as possible. So I think one thing we'd probably hope that you guys would be willing to do as staff is after it's gone through all of the committee's changes, that it's whatever, and the committee feels comfortable with a final product. I think having you guys look at it as well and give your polishing touches, make sure everything seems factually accurate from your standpoint, just to make sure when a final product does go out, it's the best product possible.
Also, along those lines, if there was a problem area, but you felt you were as far as you could get, I'm sure that, if you just kind of highlighted that area, then we could also look into it.
Okay.
What is that brown
I
dot?
guess so on this open space requirement, though, I do think we would request that the town, that someone validate those for us. Is that reasonable? Or should we just assume that these numbers, I'm uncomfortable assuming that they're right.
I think they need to be validated.
And then, I guess we should ask on this one too, if the town thinks that all 6 properties are in those parcels, or if, well, I don't know. I mean, I didn't see anything that showed them separate when I looked at the map that would delineate one from the other one, since they're not, well, I don't know. The annexation part is the part that's difficult for me because it doesn't show them inside the town border. So
I can't believe all of them. I mean, if you look at Google Maps, they're clearly all within the.
but if you look at that Boulder County
Yeah.
property line, you might want to look it up. If you can look it up, it might be helpful. But you definitely see it meander through Superior right around these properties. And you click on each one and they show that they're non-annexed.
So that would put them in unincorporated Boulder County then?
I think so.
I thought that was after that, though. I thought that was around the bend after the tunnel between Louisville and.
No, I thought the same thing. So I was surprised when I saw that.
So what is that sales status? I mean, it says some parcels on the market. That's obviously old
Again,
information.
this is where we need to, this was just another status that was in the old document. That's why I have it highlighted, because I just don't know what to put there.
So there's a part of me that asks why were these selected in the first place? Was it because they were on the market at one point in time? Are we still wanting to target, I mean, if there are in fact 7 properties individually, I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of individual properties to target as a whole. entity. And if they do come up for sale, will we buy them one by one over time? I mean, I've always had problems with this whatever we're calling it, 76th Street. And I'm not quite sure, like you, what to do with it.
Well, I mean, reality is I don't even know how to pronounce it, but the one in the middle, the big one, if that one came available, you could do something with that. You could put a trailhead
But do
there
you
and
need
into
all
those
the
other
others
trails,
around
and
it?
you probably don't.
Right.
But if you had them, it would make the space a better space.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I hate breaking out each one of these into
Right.
6 individual.
And again, I don't know what the original purpose or intent or isolation of these particular properties and all of Superior was. I mean, it's on our radar now, but I just kind of question why, how we'd handle this situation if one became available.
Right, if the Kelly property became available, what would you do?
Right. Now, granted, they're like Bojack. They're on the edge of the open space, Boulder County. So from that standpoint, I understand. But why not others,
Well, I don't know if there are other
I mean, was there-
privately owned
Of
big
sig-
pieces of land.
Right, of significant acreage. That's what I'm guessing too. Like, obviously, Sagamore is going to not be a target because it's so many individual small properties and it's already been developed. But it's just, these are not terribly big, and there are 7 of them. So
Sorry, it was 6. I had that
Or
number
6.
wrong.
3,
Yeah.
4, 5, yeah, 6.
But in the original view, right, the maps only
And-
showed actually 4 of
4,
them.
right.
So this one, we just need to figure out what to do. I mean, I tend to think we need to keep it just
Yeah.
because it was in the original document.
Right. Plus, it'd be great if they did become available. I mean, it'd be wonderful to maintain some kind of open space there and, potentially be a tie-in to other trails in Boulder County and potentially a new trailhead too. Because
Oh, got it.
there's nothing there right now tying Louisville, the tunnel between Louisville to Superior, and having a place where we could tie in would be great, personally.
I think how it's written now with this description and then the OSAC observations, I think it covers that discussion and how it's multiple parcels of land, but for this document, it's like one entity,
Right, one blob, right.
And so then, like, the other parcels, or not parcels, but the other properties all follow the same pattern? The way you have it written, like the description and parcel status and OSAC observations?
Yeah, it all follows this exact form.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think maybe what we do is just remove sales status.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah,
From this line?
Yeah, that makes no sense to have.
Okay.
I think we remove it for all the properties,
them.
right?
And I
Yeah,
think this was the only one that had this, which I thought was odd from
Oh,
the
really?
original document.
Yeah.
And if you start
Especially when
looking
you're-
at them, right, see the other ones
Oh, interesting.
didn't have that, right? It
Yeah.
was
Yeah, that's an outlier.
I didn't even notice that one there.
I would take
actually,
it. Sales status right there.
but I think you sort of put that into development, that this,
Mhm.
I think you just merge all those into there.
Mhm.
It's interesting that level 3 was on the market at that point in time.
Yeah. So anyway, I think just in general, sales status should be removed
Yeah.
and merged into any sort of development. It's kind of sale or develop, I mean, it's risk of development is what it is.
Right.
So, okay. I think I have everything I need on this one. Any other comments on? And then the other notes I have in here, and I'll leave these in when I send it out to you, is that if you want to go listen to the recording from the May meeting, I've got the time into the meeting where we discussed that specific parcel. I just felt that's useful if you actually wanted to go review what we added, because I took the original notes and then I weaved in any other comments that we had from our meeting on the OSAC observation. So it's a hybrid of both. Right, so like the city of Louisville plans to connect to the 36 underpass, that's all new, right? That wasn't even there in the 2005.
Mhm.
I mean, the only comments I really have on this are I kind of agree it's a little strange that we have these grouped together because we would have to deal with them individually, most
Yeah.
likely. However, geographically, I think the link is there that makes us kind of think of them as a whole. I mean, you know, if McVeigh came on the market, you know, would we then, you know, potentially proactively try to go after the big parcel in the middle or something like that? And so I think rather than split these out into 6 individual things in the document, we leave them grouped. But I think we probably all ought to at least consider what we would do if one of them came on the market, or if, you know, something like that happens, because I think it would probably require some creative thinking about.
So
what
this
to do.
actually might be something good to add in the comments, that the committee rated this cluster of properties as a whole. However, depending on if certain properties came onto the market, it might be worth considering, at least considering the purchase.
Mm-hmm.
The other interesting thing about this to me is that you probably all saw it as well. There's the kind of community get together on this northwest corner of Superior, which, you know, this kind of ties into. It'd be interesting to see what kind of input about these properties, if people even know they're.
I bet
there.
you people don't even think about it.
Yeah.
I bet that's outside.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Current realm of thought, anyway.
So I'll add that comment. I think that's a good one, because you're right, like Turnbull, like some of these could be really interesting. The ones on the end,
Yeah.
right, this could be access as well as some sort of trailhead or
Well, even
something.
even Soane.
Yeah.
That has interesting potential.
Just, yeah, it's right near the underpass.
Connecting the underpass.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
That's the biggest one
Yep.
right there.
So
Like those 3 are, anyway.
individually, they all have their own unique.
Okay.
Yeah, we can drool and salivate as much as we want, but.
So that one I think is the most interesting one. You know, Anderson, we know that this is most likely going to be developed, but we'll get the most recent status and update it here. I don't know if there really wasn't much other comment here. The other thing I will mention is the original doc had pictures of the properties here, so I replaced them with maps instead, just so it's
Agreed.
easier to understand what property we're talking about.
Yep.
We did talk about that in a previous meeting as wanting to do that, but that is a big change to the document. So this one, I don't have anything, I mean, it's just the highlighted areas where we want to get validation.
Yeah.
Okay, Bulljack is really similar.
Now, that's 2 properties, right? That's 2 separate properties, I think.
In anything I saw, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I think it's 2 separate properties. It's owned by the same family, but it is 2 separate properties. Just so you know.
I mean, should we mention that?
I personally would, because if it's split among family members, see, right there, 2.
Yeah.
If it's split among family members and there's some kind of infighting and one decides to sell, and the other
Yeah,
one
that's a
doesn't
valid
want to.
point.
Yeah, and it has the owners as separate family members as well.
Mhm.
Man,
Yeah.
that one in the middle would be so weird, though, if that was.
Agreed.
But yeah, no, it's a good note.
So yeah, we'll add that into the comments. That's good.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Level 3, should we change the name on this? Should we call it CenturyLink, or should we?
I would call it CenturyLink and indicate that part of it is in Broomfield and part of it is in Superior.
Part of this is in Broomfield?
Yes, sir.
Should we call it CenturyLink / Level 3?
Formerly level
Yeah, maybe
3.
formerly known
Yeah.
as.
Yeah, the lower western part is actually part of Broomfield. And the line kind of goes at a weird, it's like straight across there, so.
Okay.
It's in Broomfield County, but
Broomfield County?
not
Well,
within
city.
Superior?
Yeah, correct. Broomfield
Okay.
County,
I did not know that.
yep. Yep, that's why I was hoping we would have a meeting with the Broomfield Open Space Committee to discuss that.
I mean, at the end of this document does have a map of the original properties and any changes, so we could just list it there as well, if we don't want to say formally level 3. We could-
Everyone knows it is level 3. I mean,
Agreed.
maybe in 4 or 5 years they won't, but for this to be immediately useful to everybody.
I agree.
There's the line.
Oh, wow, it's quite a bit.
It's quite a bit.
It's actually,
Significant.
I'd say, at least half of it's in Broomfield.
Mhm.
So kind of see this line right here?
Yep.
We just cut it across over here. This part is all Broomfield, and this part is Superior.
Boulder County.
Or Boulder
Superior.
County, yeah. So, this had some other notes.
So, I mean, that brings up an interesting point, meaning that if it were to ever
Mhm.
go under development, we would not even have input on development plans, correct? I mean, why would they bring it to the Superior Board if it's in an
They
incorporated?
probably have to do it
Broomfield?
to both,
They have to do both,
They
yeah.
do?
Yeah.
because it's in both counties.
Yep. Depends on where they would build,
Yeah, where
of
they're
Right,
course.
Yeah.
exactly. That's why I was saying if they were building close to 120th,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which would probably be the more desirable place, right? The rest of that terrain is pretty rough.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this note here about it being acquired by CenturyLink, we'll just have to check this right at the end to see if it's done, because when I put this document together, it wasn't actually completed.
It's still not complete. It's still
Yeah.
going through regulatory approvals.
Okay, so maybe we just change the date. I mean, this is an important note to just leave here. I don't know where else to put it.
So
You know-
does that 116 acre designation carry over with CenturyLink purchasing it? Does it still require that?
I'm mostly sure this was in the original document. I don't know the source of this, which might be, I mean, this per agreement is pretty vague.
Exactly.
And also, does that 116 include the Boulder space, or is that just the Superior acreage?
Yeah,
Because
I
I, for
have
some
no
reason, thought it
idea.
was more when you included everything there.
I think that's something.
2 paragraphs up, it says it encompasses approximately 195 acres.
Up above.
Just above the description.
All right, scroll back
Oh,
a
I'm
little
sorry.
bit. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense.
I think 116 were designated open space with level 3 plus 30% of the remaining. Again, this was why I marked it, because I had no idea what this
Yeah,
meant.
This absolutely needs to have
Yeah.
somebody from the town who has the background and context.
But this was interesting, right? The open space requirement of that property is
Yeah.
79%. So that means
You don't get with
that you'd
that.
be able to, 200 acres, you could develop 40 acres of it?
I've got to wonder, like,
I think it's because of the structure of the land.
Yeah.
Oh, that just this piece right here is the only developable?
The one
That's-
along the frontage road,
Yeah.
or along 120th is
There's not-
developable, that's level, because
Yeah.
everything slopes
Yeah, but
dramatically.
there's not much, I mean, it's only this piece here. This actually is right next to where level 3 is now. It's kind of the same grade.
Right.
But we just I think we need to understand the note
yeah.
about the.
And validate it, I mean.
Yeah.
That's wildly higher than any other percentage we've seen.
Yeah.
So it makes me question it just by nature.
That was
Bless you.
because it says requirement. I mean, even if it's not developable because of the geography, I mean, that's not necessarily.
No, this word here is a little, we'd like to probably need to understand what this agreement
Yeah.
means, because if it was a handshake agreement with level 3,
Yeah,
that may not
is
be
it
in
valid
play
anymore?
anymore with
Yeah.
CenturyLink. I doubt it would be I doubt they would reference a handshake.
Mhm.
So anyway, interesting one there. Ken, you had a note here, this just was left over.
Yeah, so-
This parcel has no known, is a very large tract with medium level of threat to existing resources.
So that was something that, as I read through a lot of these, that came through the old language. That they say low threat, medium threat. That didn't seem to be well defined to me, and I was having a hard time trying to figure out how they came up with that threat classification. It seems very arbitrary to me almost. As I got through them, I almost started questioning whether having that type of language in there.
Yeah, maybe we
Added
just pull
value.
out the threat to existing resources. I
Yeah.
mean, if it's vague to us, and we're the
It's a
open
very
space committee.
qualitative term, unless you
I
can.
mean, if I do infer, I just think it would, a medium threat of it not being open land anymore.
And I think the reason I started questioning it is because it didn't seem consistent to me as I read through.
Okay.
I'll have to look at it again, but yeah, I would say just as people read through it, keep that in the back of your minds, whether keeping that threat language in there continues to make sense.
No, because I think you already covered that in the analysis that you do, in the quantitative analysis.
above.
I don't think you need to state it medium level. I think that's part of the analysis that we've done.
Yeah,
Where
I
we
tend to
quite
agree.
clearly try to specify 1 through 10 what the level of threat would be.
Yeah.
So I don't, I don't think-
I'm leaning towards wanting to get rid of it for
Me
sure.
too.
Agreed.
Okay.
Sounds good. I am going to just remove that then
That
in my
sounds
next
good.
edit.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. Sorry that it's, got to take notes also.
Mhm.
Ridge 2, there wasn't much. We want to validate that this was a true statement, that we actually considered, actually, I don't know, since we never did, I think this is a useful piece of information for us. Is it a
Yeah.
useful piece of information?
And I remember the way that it happened is it came forward saying, is this something that the committee was interested in? And we all discussed it in one committee or one meeting, and I think between that meeting and the next, we said everyone would go drive by that, take a look at it, and then when everyone got back for the next meeting, there was just conversation about it doesn't have a lot of value. It's
Cut off.
Yeah.
It's an island.
So the wording of it was what I was curious about how we should put it in, because we considered recommending it. I mean, we considered looking at it, and then after the further review, we didn't move forward due to the regional draw, low potential for blah, blah, blah. I mean, maybe we can clean the language up a little bit, but I think it was fairly accurate. I just can't remember if 2015 was also the right.
Tracy, was it?
I think it was last year.
Was it last year?
Yeah.
Okay.
That sign just blew down
Yeah.
6 months ago. And it was only present for 6 months, so.
Oh,
Should we go back?
we can look in the notes. That's
Yeah, okay.
And again, how important is that information, honestly? How important is it that we considered it once and then we reconsidered it in this evaluation? I'm not sure it's really important, to be honest, the time frame.
Well, maybe the time frame isn't. I do think having the history that we did consider it and
Yeah,
that's
decided
fine.
not.
That's fine.
I think it's important to note that there was a point in time where we looked at it and passed, because, in 10 years, somebody may say, well, this was the one piece that's out there, why didn't we get it?
Well, we did the same thing with the Richmond 15 property, and we passed on that. Now we're like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't have passed on that.
Right.
So, and that was around the same time frame as I recall. Sandy was our before Martin.
I do think the date will be important, because this could be any time
It's-
between
it's a very
2004
easy date to
and-
find, but-
So let's just find the date.
Yeah, I can find that just scrolling through our notes. Yeah.
Okay. Rogers Farm, I don't think there was anything in here that was all that needed much discussion, except for the pieces we need from the town on this. So we can move on unless people want to.
That's an interesting one with this I didn't watch the planning commission's meeting last night, and I'm not going to be available to go to the 2 sessions in the upcoming week or so. But if for some reason something happens to that property, right, where it suddenly becomes available, or the town has more input on what we can do with it, for instance, if the developer starts balking at because the town isn't able to, or they're not able to do what they want to do with it because the town and the board says, well, this isn't good enough. I guess what are we saying about this property exactly? I mean, this is another key property here, in my opinion. Is close to our new potential, future trailhead. It's close to the new downtown. It's close to
It's number 2.
all the trail. Yeah.
I mean, it's still in our top.
Yeah, I mean, I
It's
think,
our,
But
I think that ranking says it all, that if there's anything we can do with it, open space related, that's at the top of our
Well,
list.
it's a viewpoint corridor as
It
well.
is
I
a
mean,
huge
especially
one.
from the new Superior downtown.
it's huge.
So, I mean, I definitely think you're correct. It is a key property.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's,
and I certainly have interest in it.
yeah, absolutely. And again, whether it's a playing field or whatever, yeah, I mean, that's something.
So maybe, I guess, just as we're reading through the comments on it, if anybody wants to keep in the back of your mind whether or not we need to add anything.
To kind of emphasize its importance, I
importance.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So just keep that in your back of mind and then add edits if you think we need to emphasize more.
so we did add Superior 15. I think the Richmond property was on there originally, but because it's town-owned, but it still is open, we still wanted to consider it in this.
Allison, is it called the Superior 15 now
Yeah.
officially? It is, okay.
Or
What?
town 15?
I was gonna say, I thought I heard Matt say call it something else in the last meeting. Might be the town 15. I don't think it was Superior 15.
Okay.
I've heard it both, but I think most recently it's. been
What
town.
does the 15 stand for?
Acres.
Acres.
Oh, that's really how many acres it is?
Mhm.
We'll just mark this as wanting some input from the town to make sure we have that right.
Yeah, I would say right now, you can adjust it to town 15. I'm like 90% sure. That's what I heard Matt say at one of the last, it was either retreat, board meeting, or budget meetings, one of those meetings in the past couple of weeks.
Okay. The document got a little out of format here, but the next is Zaharias, our favorite one.
Are we allowed to talk about that?
Are we allowed to have this? I think there's a hush
The,
on that one.
the biggest question here was that I wrote this that said the reservoir is not suitable for recreation, and the recent recommendation was a 100-yard buffer between the water and any human access. Ken had a good point that who made this recommendation? I remember it from somebody standing up and talking in some open comment from one of our meetings, but that's not necessarily a valid source.
Correct,
So I might vote for just removing this because I think that will all come out in the development plan, won't it?
Yeah, so I don't know what the timing's gonna look like. It might be really close. I guess, Allison, if we just want to quickly skip ahead, do you have any update on the Boulder County ecology study going on at Hodgson Harris?
I do.
Because that might give us the answer that we're looking
Okay.
for this document.
Okay.
If we're ever going to get an official type of answer, I think that's the closest we're going to get.
So I do have an email sent to Susan Spalding, who is the senior wildlife biologist with Boulder County Parks and Open Space. And there was also a lot of back and forth about the ferret reintroduction.
Mhm.
I'm sure everybody is aware of. And some of the information was the first step about reintroducing the ferrets was growing the prairie dog colonies because that's their food. And the size must be equal or above 1,500 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is some information on, plague management with prairie dogs and, using oral vaccines and dusting for the fleas and things like that.
Wow.
And as soon, I've reached out to her, who has headed up this ferret reintroduction project, to see if they've done any recent ecological surveys or information on that area. So I'm just waiting to hear back from her.
Well, they were doing a specific ecological study for us as well on the Hodgson Harris Reservoir area, right?
Well, according to one of our residents
has been coming to some of the meetings. So I've reached out and I'm just waiting on.
Well,
Yeah, but when we had our meeting with the Boulder County Commissioners, they specifically volunteered their staff ecologist, their wildlife ecologist, to come out and do the ecological assessment,
So this has to be the same, must be the same person that I've
Yeah.
reached out to, so hopefully.
yeah, so I think, so if you can, I think what we would need to know is what the time frame is, I guess, on when they think they'll have that study finished on the Hodgson Harris Reservoir area.
Okay.
If we can delay this so we can get the most recent information in, that would probably be best. I mean, we're so close that if we delay a month or two to make sure that we have that information memorialized, I think that would add a lot of value for this property.
And I think it would be important, sometimes a game of telephone's played and what's communicated isn't necessarily what was originally communicated. So I think it would be important to just kind of remind her that the commissioner specifically told the trustees here that we have access to the staff, wildlife ecologist, and that they would do a study, like a full-on study, and it wouldn't just be, a little visit here and there and an email here and there, but a full study so we can actually, understand what the site has.
Perfect.
So I'll mark that. I'll change the wording, and again, I'm highlighting anything that I think we need to, need more information. The financial discussion, Ken, I didn't go through this in detail. I don't know. Last time we talked about keeping all of this, and there were some pieces we wanted to pull out, which I did. And then we talked more, we talked also about adding a graph of the funds over time, as well as historical purchase prices. There was some discussion that maybe including the amount of the fund could be problematic. It wasn't a huge deal, but they just said, when that data is readily available, people come out and say, well, why aren't we spending that when they know what the number is? Now, anyone can go look in the town's books and see what's on the books for it.
Who said that?
Who?
Remember? Yeah, I don't remember.
Patrick
Oh, really?
was telling me that there's some sensitivity to that, or there has been in the past. So this section, I just don't even know what we should do. I mean, part of it, again, I don't know, maybe it doesn't even belong in this document, like the history section. I mean, is it just...
I still like the section where we talk about alternative means of purchasing land. I think that's good to have in. I think you should always keep something of that in there because, again, for future committee members, to reference what are different ways. When I came on, I looked through this document, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I had no idea. The history is information that's interesting as well, but on the other hand, this actually, that history is the past. This can be used for any time. And I'm all about keeping things that are relevant for past, present, or future. And I think that the information about different ways of acquiring or getting grants or whatever, for me anyway, again, speaking for myself, I think is important to keep in the document.
So what if when I read this, it just seems so randomly placed. We've got our descriptions of the properties, and then we got the financial, and then we jump into the ranking, right? Is that how this flows right now?
I would move the ranking above that because you're looking at
Yeah.
what's available,
Yep.
So I'm almost
how you
thinking,
rank it, and then how could we purchase it?
So do we just flip-flop those?
I would
or
flip-flop them.
Or does this, I mean, this could also become an appendix.
I was almost thinking an appendix for it.
If you just consolidated it into a paragraph, you could include it in the introduction.
I really
Yeah,
like all the
it's quite a bit
financial data
more.
though.
So again, you think about how you put an English paper together. You think about your introduction, the body of the thing, and then, or in a scientific paper anyway, you have your introduction, your body of your paper, your hypothesis, and then your conclusion, right? And how you're going to go about proving it. And in my opinion, again, from when I came on board, and for future people coming on board, again, there's not much left, and it may not be valid for long. But again, people want to know, well, we have these, how do we go about getting to the end point of actually acquiring them? Whether you put an appendix at the end, I don't care, or put it in the conclusion, I don't care. As long as it's somewhere in this document, I think it's important enough to keep that information in the most current document that we post to the web.
Okay.
I agree,
mean,
and I would like the graphs that you originally spoke of, but if Patrick says we can't do that, of course, then we
Well,
won't do that, but.
the only-
He didn't say we can't do it. He just said there has been sensitivity to it in the past, was how he phrased it.
And if you think about it, people are going to say, wow, we have millions of dollars. If you keep extrapolating that information out, it's like, we're going to have this much by this time period, but what are we doing with that? So it might bring up the question of why aren't we doing more with what we have, you know? And that's the only thing I can think of. Is
And I mean-
or why aren't we funneling it somewhere else? Why are we paying this tax and it's not being used?
And
But I always look at it as that it's their money. I mean, It's
But it is
not.
their money, right? It's public
Mhm.
money, absolutely.
I'm kind of torn on it because one side of me says, yeah, it'd be useful, especially if, you know, people that aren't on this committee that are citizens here would go back to read it. They might look at it and say, we've got this amount of money and we have a shrinking number of parcels. Maybe it makes, you know, the community's priority to go get something. Now, the other side of it, I think of it as, you know, if I'm sitting here on a property, you know, one of the 5 or 6, and I look out and I can look at this document and say, oh, well, I can see that they have exactly $7.5 million in this fund. I think I know what my price is.
So the question is, what does Boulder County do? Do they have a graph where they show how much they have in the pot, the kitty over time, and how it's grown? Do they show something similar? Do other towns,
I've never seen that with Boulder County.
Well, with anybody, any town or county. I mean, what do they do? What do they show? So
I've never looked.
Yeah.
if there is a precedence for that or not.
I mean, even if there isn't a I mean, whether there is or isn't, we can still go whichever way we want.
I agree, but
Well, so here, what I'm trying to get, what I'm thinking is so we're talking about a graph of overtime. Let's say the past 10 years, this is how that fund has fluctuated.
Since 2005.
So what is that really telling us? When we see big drops, that must be an indicator that we bought something or spent that money somehow. So in one of our appendices, we've got the history of when things were bought. Beyond that, I think the other thing, the useful piece is, okay, how quickly is that moving up? So basically, what are we collecting every year?
Mhm.
Yeah, and maybe we just include those two numbers. At the time of writing this document, the balance was, and the tax incomes each year is approximately this amount.
Yeah.
Which would be a history.
I mean, it is kind of the history. I mean, the weird thing is, though, you know, the town took a loan out of it for Wildflower Park, so you see a drop in it, but now you have a drop that isn't
Yeah,
explained through a
exactly,
property
that's-
purchase, and
And
so it
could
gets
happen again
weird.
with Parks 1 and 2.
So,
Even though that's history, if you scroll up just a little bit, Ryan, to the
Yeah.
beginning of this section, we have a little bit of history here. I think that would flow well after the
That's-
0.3 open space.
That's the one piece of information we wanted from the history. It's
Exactly.
repeated right here.
So we can say for fiscal year 2017, we collected X amount of money, and then that left X amount in the total open space
Yeah.
fund. And then there's our baseline
I
for
like that.
everybody.
so Ken, I need to go through the rest of these. You have some other, I mean, should we go through these comments, or should we?
Can I ask you one?
Yeah, oh, yeah,
one
sure,
question? Are you
sure.
going to put any information about that? So you have all the acquisitions in that appendix about the loan to Wildflower anywhere?
I wasn't going to. I didn't see what value that would bring, but I hadn't thought about it that much. Because in a couple of years, it'll just be gone, right? It'll all be paid back, and it'll just be a blip in history.
It's a good point.
Seems like it would be opening a can of worms.
Yeah. Well, and
Or
I mean,
being transparent?
I think what it comes down to is what's the point of the document? Is it to track the history of the fund, or is it to identify what the open space acquisition targets are? If that's the case, and I don't know if we need the wildflower history.
I mean, this document to me is forward-looking. It's,
Yeah.
here's what we have at this point in time. We're updating from what we had in 2005.
Exactly, and the backward-looking stuff is literally to close the loop from the initial one.
Yeah.
So as long as we're closing the loop with our history, I think that's would suffice.
And I was thinking, we talked about having the historical purchase price. This would be the right place to put it,
Yes.
potentially, to say
Yep.
purchased on this date,
Yep.
this
for
many
property.
acres
Yep.
for this amount.
Yep.
Because that per acre dollar is something is an important number for all of us to know, because it's been
Absolutely.
cited many times that
Yep.
certain properties are way outside of that range that
Yep.
are problematic.
Yep.
That'd be great to have there, absolutely.
So, okay. So Ken, I guess, do we want to go through each one of your questions here, or how
Yeah.
do you want to handle this section?
We can. I honestly don't remember what the comments and questions I had were.
You just said this isn't the best example
So
on an
let's-
acquisition.
So many of these opportunities will be associated with specific parcels.
And so I did not touch this from the previous document. So
Gotcha. It just seemed so random to me. So there was an example would be the parcel with some acreage in the floodplain being eligible for urban drainage funds. I guess that came from the original one. I guess thinking creatively. I mean, my initial thought was let's highlight like the GOCO, the Land Conservation Trust, et cetera. But I mean, heck, if we can get funds from urban drainage, then yeah. Especially hearing what Tracy talked about tonight from her experiences at COSA.
So I think we could just sit here for another hour going through these. I don't know if that's the best use of our time.
Yeah.
I think, Ken, you and I should clean up this part the way
Let's
that we
do that.
want it and then circulate it
Yeah.
to the
We'll circle
group.
that in the next group.
So then the last section will be the recommendations. And so obviously this is all new content with a table of how we ranked and the overall ranking. And then the conclusion that we all had, that there was a tight clustering at the top, and then there was a second tier clustering, and just discussing that realization from what we had. And it's pretty short and sweet, right? It's pretty much that
Yeah.
in terms of our recommendations. And then it gets into the appendices, where this is the map from all the old properties. The discussion here is, should we actually include the old map for reference? So, I mean, I don't really care. It might actually help people understand
would.
which one is which.
I would.
So, and it's there, so
they
we can
get
just,
it's just to see how much things have changed,
Mhm.
over time.
Yeah, that's true. That's a
Where
good point. I mean, it might be
I
the
would-
most shocking thing in the document to
Yeah.
see what was there and what's not now.
And your person who just picks this
And-
document up, they see, oh, what's the
And-
Verahee Ranch?
Right, and you may want to color code the past one where it shows like red was developed by a developer versus blue being purchased for open space versus, so you can.
yeah,
just
we'll
click-
need the town
Yeah.
help for that.
Yeah,
That's
right.
not something I can
More
do.
skilled GIS.
Yeah, and, okay. And then the rest are just these old appendices. I don't know if we need all of
This
these.
one specifically, I was thinking we should drop. So this was repealed a year ago, 2 years ago.
Okay.
This was when the board back in 2004 said this is the optimal use of the tax funds. And then it was right around when we made the recommendation to
Wow.
do the expedited trail priorities that the board repealed this. So this, I mean, again, if we were trying to do a historical document, we would want to leave this in here and then make a note that it's repealed, but since it's not a historical document, maybe.
I would take it out.
Just
Yep.
take it out.
Take it out.
This was some open space definitions. I mean, I don't think it hurts anything to have it in here as an appendix.
It's
I mean, I
useful.
know I learned what a riparian habitat was from this, so
No, that's a perfect thing. For the
I think we
appendix.
should have in here. And that, so we really will have 2 appendices unless we just, oh no, we're going to add a third, which will be the spreadsheet that we
Right.
use.
Hey, could you scroll up?
Yep.
So, okay, so recommendations. And then scroll down just a tad. Okay, so I guess this is where I was saying maybe put some of that financial information, or at least ways of purchasing here at the end.
Right. So
That's what we'll do.
Pull that-
The
pull that
financial
out. Yeah, yeah.
piece is going to go
Under,
at the end.
yeah, okay.
Ron, can you scroll all the way down to the bottom of like the very end of the document? There was something that I
Yep.
don't remember if I noted or not.
I think it was this. This paragraph's outdated. Should it be changed or removed? Good idea to consult with staff.
Okay, so that was.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I see. You're saying that they recommend the board review and adopt these. I mean, that was a recommendation a long time ago. I mean, my vote is to just remove it. I mean, I don't think these are terms specific to Superior.
Yeah. So we can drop one of these.
Yeah, that's my recommendation.
Okay.
So,
So,
found
okay.
On Google.
Yeah, I learned, yeah. Okay, well, that was a lot longer than we had scheduled, but it's
Worth it.
a lot of good progress. And so I will try to wrap this up in the next week. Ken, I'll probably hit everything except for that financial section. Actually, I'll do my best on there, and then I'll get to you for one on any questions I have, and then we'll circulate it to the group.
Yep.
Get the group to approve, and then we'll get town staff to fill in data, do the data validation, and I still think it's reasonable to get this done this year.
Well, I was going to ask is, what does our work plan say? Is this something we're trying to get done by December?
In this year.
Okay, then we have to get it done. We have,
I mean, the goal is absolutely.
we have one more month, basically.
I mean, I don't know how long it'll take to get staff review. I mean, if it flows into 2018, it's certainly not the end of the world. I think a great goal is have it done.
I think
this
we
year.
need to have it done this year based on what's happened of late. And
So,
that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
so I guess.
Well, I
Well-
just want to say that I
Yeah.
think the document looks great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all the
Appreciate
work.
it.
You guys
Yeah.
have done a great job, especially you.
Yeah,
So
you're welcome.
Ryan did a great job.
It's been, learned a ton, that's for sure.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, so I would say just, so timing wise, Ryan will work on it, get it to me at the very latest, we'll try to get something to the group 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I mean, I plan to do it
And I'll
in the next day or two, just, you never know how things go
Yeah.
at home, so I can commit to a week and
And
have
my-
everything done. But
my
it's a
work-
long list of things to get done, so.
Yeah. My
but
work
no
schedule
problem.
finally slowed down too, so I can actually.
Okay, okay.
Focus on it. So then we'll get it out to the group, and I think the hope is the group definitely reads it and provides comments back
Not a problem.
before our next meeting. That way we can basically have, at least try to have a final OSAC
Mhm.
approved type document, and then we can start working with staff to get things finalized after that. So we'll have this on our next agenda just to close the loop on it.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, just real quick. Speaking of work plans, the 2018 work plan discussion is right around the corner. Rather than getting full blown into it this month, I figured what would be useful is to just kind of give everybody a quick look and refresher at what's on our work plan. And then in the back of your minds throughout this upcoming month, start thinking, what do we want to add? What do we want to subtract from this work plan? And I guess, Mark, you might be able to help give a little bit more context to it. In Monday's meeting, and I think also kind of in the retreat, it was discussed trying to refine these work plans a little bit more. Do you guys has there been any background discussion amongst the trustees about, do we still go amongst our same process and try to throw it up to you guys, or should we be working more closely with staff on developing this work plan? I mean, it seemed like there was a hope to do things differently, but I couldn't tell what exactly is going to be done differently.
Right. So I think the discussion on Monday night, the area that there was like agreement on was that there's overlapping mandates in the work plans of both ProStack and OSAC, and that's basically leading to the confusion and overlapping work and turf battles and things like that. So, I mean, from my perspective, the way I kind of see things kind of shaking out is that OSAC has open space as its mandate and should continue to be geared towards open space, and that ProStack really should not be addressing open space issues. And if the work plans then get kind of resolved in that way, and the open space is pulled out of ProStack and exclusively put into OSAC's wheelhouse, I think that probably will solve things. So, in terms of like addressing the work plan for 2018, I think, obviously everything that's open space related is, I think, necessary and appropriate for OSAC. And I'm just speaking for myself, not for the entire board here, but I'd say anything that if you guys are taking a close look at it and you think arguably could potentially, brush up, and there was the highlighted version of the OSAC and ProStack work plans that was presented as one of the exhibits on Monday night. So if you go back and look at those where there's kind of some overlap, and if you see any areas where you think that, okay, arguably this is probably outside of what OSAC should be doing and it's probably more ProStack's turf, I think it would make sense to then kind of seed that sort of issue. And if it's maybe something that's debatable and we need to kind of work out, I'd say keep it there, maybe flag it, and just say, listen, board, we need direction as to what do you want us to do.
Okay.
This was the stuff that was highlighted in the Monday night board meeting. This is where there was some overlap. We think it's more appropriate for OSAC to be doing this, or we think it's more appropriate for ProStack to be doing this. So I think it's going to be a dialogue, within the board, but I think it's going to involve ProStack and OSAC and staff
So
to really just figure out what is the best committee to be handling a specific topic.
So the starting place is still going to be us developing the work plan as best we
I
can.
think so.
Okay.
I think you
With
guys
as much detail as possible.
Yeah. So what we can do for next month is have the highlighted 2017 work plan and just pay special attention to those items that got highlighted. So I guess with that, so just quickly going through what we have had this year.
And just one additional
Yeah.
thing, I don't know how the work plans have been kind of generated in the past, whether OSAC has looked at ProStacks at all or ProStack has looked at OSACs at all. But I think it would probably be a good idea to do that, that they should be shared. Because, it's one thing to have like overlapping mandates that just arise because you guys are working independently and then you happen to have something that's overlapping. But if you're sharing, okay, this is what we plan to do and this is what we plan to do, then I think it's easier to kind of iron out the potential for overlap there. And then you have more collaboration rather than, conflict.
Yeah. That might be another leadership meeting, just once both committees have figured out. That way we can keep it moving rather than having to wait another month in between.
Oh, absolutely.
Trails is by far going to be the biggest overlap and the biggest concern. Yeah.
And that's probably going to require the board to just make a decision as to,
Yeah.
Okay, are we talking open space trails is OSAC's mandate and, hard trails?
So that's
in
the
town
hardest
is-
thing
yeah.
because, we've used open space funds for non-open space trails just because it adds the connectivity, and the majority of trails, I'm guessing in the future they're going to be built, are probably going to be spent with open space funds. That's going to be a tricky one.
Right.
That's going to be a fun board meeting for you guys.
Yeah, but it'll be important, and then hopefully we can just reach a consensus that everybody can live with, and
Mhm.
it gives the appropriate guidance, so we're not dealing with this in the future.
Yep. Okay. So, leadership elections, fairly standard. Joint meeting with the town, standard. Meet with ProStack, that's the leadership meeting. That usually is either late first quarter or early second quarter, kind of depending on what priorities are for each group. Public outreach, that's just going through what Ashley does and making sure there's nothing that or seeing what the current events are, if there are any changes we want. Starting National Trails Day, reviewing open space funding budgets and requests. I think that's something we added this past year, so that might be something we want to just refine a little bit. That's just to exactly what we're looking at. Assess existing potential trails. This was something that was an add-on, kind of a continuation from the expedited trail plan, just so we didn't lose the momentum with the trails that had been recommended. Review recommendations related to the buffer. That's basically been done, so that's going to get dropped. Determine steps, acquisition plan, we're doing that. That will get dropped. Create and finalize an open space and trails continuity document. Ryan's on that, so that'll get dropped. Transportation structure's gone. That'll get dropped. Second quarter, just budget recommendations for the next year. So that's a standing one. National Trails Day event that we'll actually do. Revisit just priorities, and that's basically a tie-in to the next one of updating the 5-year trails plan and our recommendations to Boulder County. So I think both those stay. We might want to refine this language a little bit. President's Arbor Day, that's standing. Presence at the COSA Conference, Chili Fest. Again, the wildlife enhancements that has been on here forever that I'm hoping we will finally get to and knock off our list this upcoming year.
It does say started.
There's
an X.
Yep.
Started.
We might not get those pronghorn antelope, but we're still talking about it.
Thankfully.
Yeah. Fourth quarter, review the open space management plan to incorporate any new acquisitions. So I think that's standing if we ever do have acquisitions. Evaluate how the programming went. So that's standing, and then starting our work plan. I think the big thing that we're going to have to pay attention to, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was comments from a few of the board members about kind of these ongoing areas that the board was looking for more refinement on. Am I remembering that correctly?
I remember that correctly, yes,
Yeah.
from watching.
I mean, we created, I don't remember if we created this last year or the year before.
I think it was last year.
It was last year.
And it was basically, we just had a ton of stuff that we wanted to continue to keep an eye on, but it didn't make sense to throw into any one area. So if I think when this gets submitted to the board, my guess is if we do get any pushback, it would be on stuff in here. So I would say maybe this, if we can assign it up into a certain area, or maybe we can refine the language, or maybe we evaluate it and determine whether it does or does not truly belong. But this is the area I think we'll need the most work on. So continue work to acquire open space, monitor downtown Superior development and other town developments. I think that's something we'll probably need to refine because I know there were some issues with that. Shan, monitor Hodgson Harris, pursue regional collaboration with other committees, naming trails and open space, continue to provide input on all open space and trail related topics. That was kind of our catch-all for anything that came up that we felt we needed to provide input on but didn't have specifically identified. Anything with the open space fund, monitoring board activities and providing input as needed, developing marketing strategy, providing input on the Rocky Mountain Greenway, participating on the trail maintenance program, wayfinding project, the open space report that we're working on.
Is the project actually occurring?
So that's something that the
Passport thing is what, I'm
This-
thinking, this is different?
This is different. The wayfinding project is something that the Planning Commission has had on their work plan, and they've been considering, and it's something that I know they're continuing to discuss. And I know it's something ProStac has also been discussing, so I think when that does move forward, it'll kind of be a three-way conversation, but, and then off leash. So anyway, start to think about anything you want to add, anything you feel like we can drop, and we'll get into this in more detail. We can forward this out to everybody again, so you can look at it over the month, and just everyone come prepared, ready with your ideas, so that way we can knock this out as quick as we can. Any comments, questions about the work plan before we move on?
No.
All right. Updates and look-aheads. So, just a quick debrief from Monday night's board meeting regarding the possible OSAC and ProStac merger. We're here tonight, so we're not merged.
Thanks in large part to both you and Mark.
Agreed.
I highly appreciate both of you presenting as well as you did many times. You guys did an excellent job of portraying our committee's viewpoint, what we stand for, our importance, and I just want to commend you both for doing such a good job.
I haven't watched, so give me a clip notes.
You gotta watch it.
It's
It's must-see TV.
Yeah, I agree. I watch it, and both of you spoke with better words than I would have ever come up with, and held our positions really well. And I appreciate your efforts not only in Monday night's meeting specifically, but in the previous meetings leading up to this around Zaharias and things like that. Mark, you've been our champion to the board about, volunteer committees who are working with best interest and not getting, not doing things maliciously, against this. And so I appreciate both what you said. I was shocked at the outcome, honestly. I thought going into it was a foregone conclusion. Like I said, if you haven't watched it, I would highly recommend you watch it. I think it's very good to not only see where it starts and where it ends up, but everybody's input on it from the board standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I was very pleased with the outcome.
I would reiterate that too, and thank you. Thank you.
Well, it's for at least until when, next October?
Yeah.
Things are status quo, as I understand
Mhm.
it.
Yeah. So it could come back up in a year, depending on how things shake out this next year. So it's always something under evaluation. But
I was shocked. I didn't think that what happened was what was going to happen. So I recommend you watch it.
Wait a second.
Yeah, well, there
It
were
was
some
good.
there were some key things that turned things quickly in the end, which was interesting.
And I guess the Cliff Notes version would be that OSAC's position was that we did not merge, but we did not have an official position because we had not had a meeting before to go. And so Ken represented, that we would be potentially against merging, but then ProStac's position was that they felt like we should merge.
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
So it's a very
They've
interesting.
always felt that way, though.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
nothing's.
yeah. So anyway, that's where that ended up. So
And Ken, I think you did a great job in terms of presenting your case, presenting OSAC's case, and I think the point that you made that this was listed on an agenda rather quickly before OSAC had the opportunity to meet, kind of undermined the fairness of the whole
Mhm.
process.
Yeah.
So, and I think that resonated, and then how the discussion unfolded
Yeah.
resonated as well. So.
And I think one of the big sticking points is also, this is a hard thing to transition to. So even though it's great to have these two committees, even if they tried to put the two committees together, figuring out how to do that, how many people, yeah.
But it had all been spelled out. Already.
Well,
And there wasn't necessarily agreement
Proposed.
with that.
So there were a couple things that were not brought up about potentially instead of merging. What about? Well, they were discussed somewhat, and it was more about. Again, you have to watch it, but it was more about why do we need OSAC,
Yep.
as opposed to why don't we have better definitions between ProStac versus OSAC, keeping them two separate entities that can really focus on what their mission and goals, which we have very clearly stated, and Mark reiterated during the meeting. We have it very clearly stated on what our missions and goals are versus ProStac's. There is like a 1-2 sentence thing on theirs, right? I still don't know what ProStac's mission and goals are, other than what their name is. So, I think it's really up to us at this point to really go forward and say this, again, going back to our mission and goals, these are the things in our work plan that we need to focus on, and these are the things that
Yep.
the Parks and Rec group
Yeah.
need to focus on.
Yeah, I absolutely think that before we do anything on a 2018 work plan, we all should be well aware of what
Yes.
was stated in that meeting, because I think it has incredible bearing on
Huge bearing.
going forward
Agreed.
and how we operate as a committee.
I might have to go back and rewatch it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's really interesting.
I think that's a really good point. You know, I think to understand kind of where the board was coming from to begin with, where the board kind of landed, understanding, you know, the documents that show the overlap, and then how that would affect the work plan going forward. Because, you know, we were talking about, okay, we could either dissolve things right now and then start from scratch, or we could try to, you know, fix the problem and, you know, first identify the problem and then see if we could fix it. And that's where the board kind of landed was, okay, well, we're not going to dissolve anything, and let's just see if we can kind of work through the work plans and make sure that everybody has clearly defined roles, so we're not, you know, stepping on each other's toes.
And I hate to say it, but it's really going to be up to us to fix things. It is really going to be up to us to fix things.
I think that's a good, oh, sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
Were they renamed? So was the open space taken out of?
No, nothing was
changed.
changed. Yeah. Yeah, and there's definitely going to be, I think, further guidance from the board. I mean, throughout this year, depending on how the work plans go, depending if there's continued overlap, I mean, it sounded like, I mean, I think Mark made a really good statement that it's up to us, the board, to provide guidance. I mean, these committees are trying to do the best they can. They're doing what they're supposed to do. If there's overlap, we need to give them the guidance, so we can set the tone and let the board guide us.
I think it is good, though, that it's in our hands.
Agreed.
That we can
Well, it is
refine
now.
this in a way that is true. But, you know, I think we should actually go back and look at our mission and goals before we work on the work plan to make sure that everything is in line with that. Because if we do have things on here that are more Parks and Rec
Mhm.
related,
called out.
then we probably should remove it.
Yep.
And I
That's
think
a
it's
good point.
really good guidance.
And
So-
there's still gray zones, right? Like
Mhm.
Parks 1 and 2, everyone would say, well, that's more of a Parks and Rec thing. What does open space have to do with that? Well, our input is the creek corridor,
Mhm.
right? That's our input in the trails that surround it.
Is that
So-
what it's separated out though from Parks and Rec? The creek?
The FDPs were, but
Yeah.
you can never look at one without the other because they're so
Yeah.
complementary of each other.
So my recommendation going forward is, you know, like the board said that, you know, now we've got those specifically carved out portions of the board meetings where the committees can actually come and give their recommendations and kind of talk to us rather than just in public comment.
Mhm.
I think it would be helpful to just say, you know, we watched the meeting, we were there, obviously, the whole committee, we discussed it afterwards, we had our meeting, you know, 2 days after the board meeting, we're working on a work plan going forward, and we're looking to address, you know, the issues that were raised during the board meeting, and, I mean, to the extent that the board wants to give some guidance kind of through that process, and I think a dialogue is more helpful than just, you know, presenting a work plan and then starting the process, but
I think that's a good
knowing
point.
that you heard the board, and, you know, thanks for keeping us in existence.
Yeah.
And we hear you loud and clear, and we want to work to, you know, make things more efficient.
It seems
It's
like
always
that would be
thing.
a good time for, like, OSAC and ProStac to be there together to compare the work plans. Or maybe outside of that,
Yeah.
like
Well,
the leadership.
So I mean, this might be before, you're suggesting before work plan creation.
Right, I mean, I think it makes sense for ProStac and OSAC to be working together on the work plans, you know,
Yeah.
from the outset, and just saying, let's
So why don't we
avoid
invite
a
them
turf
to our
battle
meeting?
before.
You are always going to their meetings. Why don't we invite them to come to our meeting for once?
I only watch their meetings.
Oh, okay. I thought you went.
I watch a lot on video.
Yeah.
Although actually I'm going to the next one. Just, I had something else in public comment I wanted to bring up, but. I
But
can
it just
certainly
seems like,
invite them.
you know, both committees should know what, you know, each other
Yeah.
is doing, right? And
Yeah.
and so this is what we're thinking about for our work plan. What are you guys thinking about for your work plan? Obviously, we need to submit this to the board. Let's not work in isolation. Let's work collaboratively and see if we can, you know, avoid any sort of overlap, because that obviously would make the board's life a lot easier if you've already taken out the potential for overlap.
So should we do our work plan and then plan a meeting with them thereafter, if they're on the same page with doing that? I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not invested in that, but anyone else have a better idea?
I can reach out to Peter and just start floating what we've talked about tonight to him and get his input. I think, I mean, we need a starting place. So if we work on our work plan first, and then they also work on their work plan, and then we just say, okay, even though we're going to work on our work plan next month, we won't make our recommendation to the board to accept it. We'll just say, okay, this is where it is. PROSTAC does the same thing. We do a leadership meeting after those meetings, and then wherever we land, the work plans get finalized in the December meeting.
Because
Yeah,
if the board's going to be, considering like a clear, delegation of duties between the two committees, I mean, to the extent that the committees have already worked that out, from the outset, that makes the board's life a lot easier rather than trying to, arbitrarily just say, okay, this is where we're drawing the line.
Right.
And then, if that doesn't necessarily gel with what either committee or both committees is thinking, I think that just would make life easier, because if you're already understanding, like, okay, we're going to handle trails, you guys don't handle trails, or whatever the line's going to be.
Right.
And we might not necessarily be able to reach an agreement on that, but if we can eliminate some of the things where, okay, there's no dispute on these three issues. This is the one where we can't because we both want to do it. Board, help us out. I think that just will streamline the process and make it a little easier to reconcile the.
I'll reach out to Peter so we can get this kind of on the books and figured out, and we'll go from there.
Because I think a part of the problem in the past has been how much time it's taken to iterate.
Yeah, 2 or 3 months
Us, them,
to go back
them,
and forth.
and then back and forth.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
it needs to be done in a month,
Oh, yeah.
as
Well,
opposed to 2 or 3.
And we've never looked at PROSTAC's work plan while we develop ours, and I know they've never looked at our work plan when they develop theirs, so this is a good opportunity for
We can always look at
collaboration.
their past work plan, right?
Yeah, we just haven't.
Right, right, and that's, right. So maybe we should, if you're going to send this out, maybe if we can get PROSTAC's 2017,
That
this
was-
year's,
that was
sent
in-
out at the same time.
That was in the board packet for this past Monday, so it's easy to grab.
Okay.
And I'm not suggesting that, like, going forward in perpetuity, that the two committees always necessarily need to be looking at each other's work plans, but just for purposes of just kind of
Sure.
a clear delineation of, whose roles are what,
I think
it would
it's
be,
a
I think,
good-
helpful. And, because the board's packet was, there's a lot of highlights on the overlapping issues, and just looking at them,
Mhm.
there's a lot of overlap, so that needs to be figured out.
Well, the root cause that brought this up to the board was that staff was having a lot of overlap. So I think wherever we can look as a committee to say, well, there might be overlap, how can we resolve this with PROSTAC before it gets to staff?
Right.
Yeah.
Then I think that looks good back to the board, saying, hey, you guys are addressing the issue that
Yep.
almost made us bring these two together.
Yeah.
So-
And I think another thing, it wasn't mentioned on Monday night, but I think another thing that's going to help with that exact problem of staff time is, just so everyone knows, we are now responsible for doing our own notes for the meeting. Ryan volunteered, he's doing tonight's notes. We'll have that rotate amongst us, just so everyone gets a turn, no one gets stuck having to do the notes. I think the one piece that was discussed is the chair cannot do the notes. So we'll.
Everyone else's game.
Yeah, so I'll shoot an email out, just, maybe we'll just go by alphabetical orders. Who knows? We'll do it, but.
Chair election next year, even more interesting, right?
There you go.
More than one person will volunteer.
What's worse, being chair or being recorder?
Is there any other ways that we could reduce the staff time? Like, what else is eating up all of the time, the things that we could minimize?
I think the notes are a great start, because the whole time, every time somebody asks me something, I'm sending emails to Ryan and Ken and able to look this stuff up really fast and like get it out, and then I'm not working on it during the week. So I love the notes. I think it's great.
And that was one of the things that Patrick was saying during the budget meeting, was that
Right.
it takes like a full day to put together the minutes for committees, and that's a day that they could be spending doing other things.
Exactly.
If there is ever anything else, if you guys could pass that on to us, just so we could make the year.
Yeah, don't suffer in
better.
silence.
Okay. So next Next item, Parks 1 and 2 update. So this is just closing the loop from our last meeting. Manager Magley had come and talked to us about the potential of a loan from the Open Space Fund for the construction of Parks 1 and 2. That did not go forward for various reasons. It doesn't sound like that's completely dead. My understanding is the board still has high hopes and would like to get something done,
Right.
so I don't know.
So the
what-
FDP was approved. So
Right.
The FDP on the parks were approved, but then there was the funding agreement with the developer that was not. So basically, we've got a development plan with nothing else
plans to
that
develop
would
it.
enable it to be financed and built, so. But it remains kind of an open issue. I think there's some on the board who are like adamantly opposed to the notion of it, and some on the board who are really in favor of it. So I don't know how it's going to shake out.
Yeah. In the immediate future, the loan was removed from the 2018 budget at the very least. So I think it's something we'll continue to watch, but that's just where that has landed for now. Next topic, Pros Tour. Allison, do we have any dates that you guys were looking at or thinking of?
It looks like October 28th has shaken out. And I don't have times yet, but that's the date that
It's coming up.
has been
It
proposed.
is, it's quick.
That's unfortunate. I might be traveling.
October 28th. Okay, so that's a
It's
Saturday.
a Saturday.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. I assume just as things get finalized, you'll just there'll be an email sent out to everybody?
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Standing updates, Joel?
So, as we were getting started tonight, I sent the latest update from the Rocky Flats Council to the email to everybody on this committee. It's got some interesting stuff in there around testing of water and soil, and about how the pit, or whatever it's called,
Yeah.
they've measured it after the big rain in August, and patch some things up. There's some interesting reading in there. I won't go into too much detail. The one thing I did want to mention to this committee, if you haven't seen it in the news, is that the lawsuit that was stopping Rocky Flats from going forward has now been withdrawn, or dismissed, I guess probably is the better way to put it. Mark, the lawyer.
Right, it was dismissed.
Yeah. So I think that starts to put the wheels in motion again for a 2018 opening for Rocky Flats Wildlife Refuge, although.
It was dismissed without prejudice, though, which means that they can refile. So
Okay.
there's two ways of dismissing a case: with prejudice, which means you're stuck and you can never reintroduce the case, or without prejudice, which means you can reassert it. And basically, the grounds for dismissal, the judge agreed with the federal government's position, which was that they had not moved forward with any
Not
specific
imminent.
plans. It wasn't imminent. They didn't, construction wasn't about to start or anything like that. So they said, this is going to happen at some point in the future, but there are still a number of things that need to happen before we can get to the point where it's going to be imminent. So I would imagine that as we get closer, the group that filed the lawsuit will probably refile it.
Yeah. So that's really what's going on. I've recently ridden the existing parts of the Rocky Mountain Greenway, and it literally ends in a dead-end circle up in the Westminster Off-Leash Dog Park, if you're all familiar with that. And where it goes from there is, very up to debate, I'm sure. I mean, we've seen many different proposed things, but like I said, the email I sent out has a lot of interesting findings from, the readings that they're taking on the site. So I encourage you to look through that.
Cool. Thank you.
Just a bit ago.
Shan Trailhead. I guess, Allison, do you have, I know that we put it in our notes last month, just questions / comments to the developer. I'm assuming we haven't received any response at all on any of that.
No, I haven't gotten anything back from that. And I know our budget discussions also will be finalized, I guess, in November, so we'll know for next year, what's going to happen with this project.
Okay. Did anybody else have any comments, questions about Shan Shan while we're on it?
No, I had already sent you some questions that you answered, but I didn't know if you want to bring those up here or not.
I think we're good then. Okay.
It's a quick demo. I drove by one day and it was gone.
Yeah, right? I didn't, very efficient. Actually, I think the portables are pretty quick too. Drove by, I'm like, oh man, they're gone.
The what?
Their old offices,
Yeah, what happened? Why are they, what?
Oh.
Our little house.
Yeah, what's?
full of raccoons.
New construction?
Yeah, what's going on over there? Anything just empty?
Nothing yet.
Okay.
So
It's
where are
going to be
you
a
guys-
rec center right there.
Town library.
That sounds like something for Pro Stack, so I don't want to
250
comment.
square feet. Baby pool.
So Allison, where are you guys now? Are you across the street and?
We've been in the Impact Sports conference
Oh, great.
building since February.
Oh, have you really? Oh, wow. Did not know this.
It always comes with a tour.
Yeah. You guys have some nice space over there too, I think. Okay. So I think we got the Boulder County updates. Was there anything else that, with those? Good there?
Just the ferrets.
Yep.
population.
Yeah. And can I ask more about the ferret information? Like, I know I heard it touched at the whatever meeting the board had, but I'd love to know more details.
I will hold up.
There was a pretty detailed email that I got. I'm not sure if it was from Town of Superior or through Boulder County. I'm on some of the email list. I forget where it came from.
I think Patrick sent out an
Was it
update
Patrick?
to the committee.
Okay, yeah.
I can
shared a lot
read it
of
really quick
information.
if you'd like.
Yeah.
If everyone else has already read it, then please don't.
I can forward it to you.
Do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. The next piece is, as alluded to earlier tonight, the Northwest Sub-Area Plan. This is just something to keep on our own radar. This is something that the Planning Commission has been spearheading. I'm guessing most of you have seen the recent emails go out. There's going to be 2 open houses and a web survey posted. The idea is just to, the big rock idea is to have a direction for the northwest part of Superior. That includes Original Town, the Superior Marketplace, Coal Creek Crossing, Sagamore. It's an area that doesn't have a lot of clear direction in the Planning Commission's point of view, and they want to try to develop a plan going forward with community input. I noticed something in, I think Sean pointed out to me that it wasn't clear whether they'd want to pursue this with all the committee input, whether they'd reach out to the other committees. So who knows, maybe we'll be getting a knock on the door from the Planning Commission at some point. So just something that everyone should be aware of. And that was all we had. I don't know if everyone has the opportunity, but just a reminder that volunteer dinner for the town's volunteers is Monday night at Brunelleschi's, 6 to 8.
Did everybody get an invite?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So
I will be gone.
they're always great events. So if you can, I'd encourage everybody to go. It's fun. And I've been dying to try Brunelleschi, so I can't wait.
Oh, yeah, me too.
It's a cool spot.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is that something that significant others or spouses are invited to?
Absolutely.
Yeah. With that, unless anybody has anything else they want to bring up, I think we're done. Meeting adjourned.
All right, thank you.
Oh, you too.
I'll take a stab at these notes, so they'll be.
I sent that email to you.
Usually when I see them, they're pretty quick. I was gonna say, use the ones that
Okay. Yeah.
No, I have a pretty good feel for what to put in there. Like for the COSA thing, the 3 takeaways for this. We reviewed it. Here's our sample. And then for this, there'll be a couple of comments that we reviewed it, and we kind of, what's for the next meeting. It's gonna be, thank you, Mark. It's gonna be
Take care.
13 bullets.
How long is going to do
Good night. Nice to see you.
Oh, sorry.
And you guys are gonna have a bunch of emails, all the answers.
We love it. That's awesome. Thank you. The code for the zoning or
Like I looked at one earlier in the day when it was first announced, and it was all there, and then I went back to reference it again, and it was gone, I mean, a dead link. But then, and I thought it was interesting because it was right when the meeting was going on, you sent your email, that had the exact same thought I had, which is, you just need to know where to stop and where to start.
Yeah, totally, but it was just
Yeah,
that.
and so I almost wondered if you were at the meeting and you sent it from your phone. 'cause
I was watching the meeting and I'm like, sending this out now before anything else happens.
I had full intention for being here, but
Yeah, the assessor's website.
It came up real fast, like, holy crap, that was.
Once you understand it, you go.
I almost was
Well,
Well, that's what I was thinking. Sean's like, well, I'm gonna start watching now, like, oh my gosh. This is where.
Well, I don't know if you guys can see, you were talking about, you guys have this shared drive. The thought is probably first one, or I didn't, there was a way for us to make a repository of our county documents, like our maps, our plans that we can access.
showed up, the chair of the
Theoretically,
HOA,
if,
and
you know, what
just to
you're
show you
requiring
how much support we
is
have
almost like.
for this issue, can anybody stand up
And,
and
you know,
just over across the entire.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think plenty of jokes like, maybe you should have asked for people not part of it.
So where that's the thing, it's stuff that helps us manage what we work with. But there's other ways to do this. There's so many systems that can do this now, so it might be just, but that, it would be something to work on next year.
Well, I saw Gladys, that's all I saw.
She was talking about a separate issue, she brought up the fact, yeah, that she
Oh,
said.
yeah, that too, but
I mean,
I
her
don't want that on the
interpretation, which
website,
everybody.
right?
No,
That's not-
right.
But a way to share it always
And I
disagrees
can
with
always-
that.
You can't do this because you have to bring it to a vote
I can always
to dissolve the open space committee that is responsible.
On my shared drive, and send it out
Town
to all
lawyer
the people.
is quick to dismiss that.
The hard part there is just if,
Like I said, I was shocked. I thought it was a completely foregone conclusion.
so,
It was done.
Oh, they had old lady wrapped up.
I just turned
Exactly.
But I mean, here it was gonna be, it's named by whatever person, and it's like, you know, she's in meetings.
I think what she said.
May not necessarily. It's kind of a, you start getting.
you also have the, you have like all the. You don't maybe necessarily want them all.
And I thought, who was our liaison for? We should go outside.
So it's.
I know, like, you were liaison for like 4 meetings. What happened?
Well, I mean, it's just something to think about.
Thank you.
Hey, Ken, or Sean, did you have a bag back here?
Yeah, that's mine. I'm sorry. I'm running off without that.
I think it was after my first meeting, I had my cell phone, and I set it on this chair. And I got home, I'm like, where the heck is my phone? I left it here.
Oh.
And I was going out of town the next morning.
Oh, no.
But I could use the Find My iPhone app, and sure enough, it was blinking at Town Hall. I was like, I didn't leave it at the gas station or something silly like that, so I got here right when I was.
Well, and really, nobody goes behind the guys.
Oh, yeah, I was glad to do